and welcome to another episode of Gar, Borras' Time Machine. Gar, this time we're going all the way back to the year 1960, and we're going to be talking all about the Flintstones. And I need to correct myself here, because in talking about this a little earlier, I believed it was the 60th anniversary, because I've been seeing a lot of advertisements online for that, but I guess that was last year. So actually this year is going to mark the 61st anniversary, so let's get right into it. I guess we're going back in your time machine to talk about the Flintstones and the Stone Age. Interesting time to go back to. So what was it that first made you a Flintstones fan? Can you tell that story? Do you remember very first time you saw the Flintstones?
Well, I was around.
Yeah.
I was a little kid, and that was my heyday when I was a little kid, watching cartoons and of course there was a lot of other cartoons that were on at the same time. It in the early 60s, cartoons had not exploded into the Saturday morning thing that it became later on. It was kind of transitioning from previous to that, cartoons mostly were shown in the theater between movies and things like that, and it was the very beginning of a time period when cartoons were starting to infiltrate TV.
Oh yeah.
And so it wasn't as this Saturday morning thing. It was just kind of all being tested out in trying to find where the sweet spot for showing cartoons and all of that stuff. So you would have cartoons coming on in the afternoon.
Oh yeah,
you would have the and a lot of cartoons would be on in the morning because, of course, kids are getting up and they're getting ready to go to school and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, the Flintstones was kind of an unusual one at that time because it was being shown, I guess what you would call during prime time. Yeah, I was reading that. So yeah, you man, before I even got to that, you honed in on that. Yeah, and so of course, as a kid, of course, you're watching it, but it was one of those kind of cartoons that the parents could watch with it too.
Oh yeah.
So later on, when I became a parent, those were the cartoons that I appreciated the most because some cartoons I just can't sit through.
Yeah.
But this was one of those where the parents could be entertained too. So it was an opportunity for the kid, for me to be able to watch it, me and my sister to be able to watch it without there being a conflict of my parents wanting to watch something else, because back in those days you had one TV.
Yeah, by the time I was a kid, this and many cartoons like it before were like in syndication at the time, and so I remember as a kid, like, my parents from working all week, they would sleep in on the weekends, and that like you're saying, these cartoons would entertain us kids. So while the parents are still sleeping in bed, you get up. I mean, I used to get up early, like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I just, until my parents got up, I'd be hooked to the cartoons. And so that's a very good point you make. And another thing that people got to kind of pay attention of is the fact that the popularity of the show is due in large part is because the Flintstones deal with modern everyday life in a Stone Age setting. So when we're sitting there watching the Flintstones, you ever notice, okay, this is supposed to take place during the Stone Age, dinosaurs are roaming the land, and somehow the Flintstones are able to interact with all of these prehistoric things, and at the same time, Fred, like every other modern man, loves to sit down in front of a TV and watch his favorite TV shows, and of course you're thinking, how they didn't have TVs and radios back in the Stone Age, but this is a cartoon, and so you don't dare question anything. You just kind of go along with it, and that's the cool thing about animation, I think.
Well, that was also part of juxtaposition of the comedy.
Yeah.
You know, was doing that, taking things that are really out of context and kind of using them that, you know, it was all tongue in cheek.
Oh yeah, and that's what made it so fun. In fact, the Flintstones were really great at doing that, so much that one of my all-time favorite feature-length cartoons was, again, they're both Hanna-Barbera cartoons, but where they had the movie, the Jetsons meet the Flintstones. Now, Flintstones, as we say, are set in, you know, Stone Age. Jetsons are supposed to be kind of modern age, you know, out of this world. The future. And so it's kind of like if you are a fan of either of those cartoons, which I love both, those two worlds collide, and that just takes it to the next level, if you will.
Yeah, it's just, you know, but, you know, that's the outrageousness of, you know, what makes for comedy, you know, and you know, but, you know, it was such a good, you know, cartoon, because, you know, they had all of those kind of elements, and as a kid, you know, you got a dinosaur that's supposed to be their dog, you know, Dino, and you know, you got you know, the you know, just all of these situations that are, you know, like really you know, common 60s type of topics and flavor for a lot of the TV shows that were going on at that time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, so it was kind of neat. You know, the show was extremely popular at the time, and you know, there's so many elements, you know, to the show that made for its popularity. It wasn't like one thing. It was the fact that they were combining modern time topics with a Stone Age background with all of these, you know what I mean? It was a whole pot of ingredients that made for it being so popular. It wasn't just like one thing.
Oh yeah, and you know what makes that so cool, I think, is the fact that this is a family that's based in Stone Age times, and yet they're like, it's not what we think when you watch Fred Flintstone. It's not what you typically think of the typical caveman, you know, living in a cave and going out and hunting for food. I mean, Fred Flintstone is caveman-like, but in many of his ways and in the time he's living. But it's very different because, I mean, still you see episodes where Fred is taking Wilma out to a nice restaurant to eat, and you're thinking, yeah, sure, they had, you know, restaurants in the Stone Age. But again, it shows how it's dealing with kind of modern day problems and issues that we all go through. And at the same time, if you ever stop and think, I wonder how Fred Flintstone or a typical caveman would have handled that situation. And again, it's not the typical caveman. It's kind of taking it to the next level. But that's what kind of makes it so much fun. And again, to take that another level, the Stone Age is where the Flintstones is based, and yet Fred Flintstone drives to work every day in his funny looking car. It's not a modern day motorized vehicle, but it kind of makes you think, okay, yeah, maybe there was something to that effect before modern day, you know, cars.
Well, it's funny because he would be, you know, pedaling it with his feet.
Yeah, bare feet. Yeah,
in episodes you would, you know, he would be turning on the motor, and you would hear a motor. So it was just like this whole mishmash of all of these things where, you know, and you just took it all, you know, stride. With a tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the writers had a lot of fun with it. You know, you could just be creative. There was no holds barred, you know, kind of thing, you know, where, you know, okay, he's pedaling it with his feet, but he's turning it on with a key.
Yeah. and then you think of it.
Or he's going to a gas station and filling it up with a woolly mammoth instead of a gas pump.
Yeah.
You And there was a gasoline called ethyl, ETHYL.
Yeah.
And of course, the woolly mammoth was, named Ethel.
Wow.
With Ethel.
Yeah, and then even I remember like they would wash the dishes, like the dishwasher would be a woolly mammoth and stuff. And see, the 60s was a great time because that's a time when people did not take life all that serious. For many reasons, I dare to say that if the Flintstones was like just being launched today, that you'd have a lot more people protesting for what I say is stupid reasons. Something as simple as, oh my God, they're using a woolly mammoth, in the cartoon as a dishwasher. Oh my God, that's cruelty to animals. And again, you like, stop it, people. This is this is animated TV here. It's just supposed to be for fun, or even the fact that Fred and Barney belong to an all men's club, the Water Buffaloes, and men are only supposed to go. Modern day, the world being what it is today, people would, oh my God, they're discriminating against women. But again, this is a time when people did not take things quite so serious as they do today.
Well, things were different back in those days.
Yeah.
Those days had their issues too.
Yeah.
Whatever those type of clubs that men belong to, that was more of a commonplace thing.
Yeah.
Back in those days, and it was a male bonding, kind of thing, and all of it was tongue in cheek.
Oh yeah.
And it really set a high standard for cartoons and things of that nature, because for many decades it was the longest running and most successful cartoon in the history of television. It didn't get knocked off of its pedestal until way in the future when The Simpsons came on. And then they knocked them off of that pedestal, but it took something
like
as
that
huge as The Simpsons to knock them off of that number one slot. And to think about that, what is the possibility of The Simpsons hanging on to that number one mantle for as long as the Flintstones did? I just have this feeling that that something will come along that will be, extremely popular too, that'll probably knock The Simpsons off of that number one pedestal too.
Oh yeah.
But it's just, just kind of those measuring sticks of popularity of shows. I think the Flintstones hung on to that number one in the history of television for like 3 or 4 decades or something like that.
I think it was 3 decades. And here's the thing, I was reading up on that. I mean, okay, first of all, compare the Simpsons to the Flintstones, and they're both unique in that, the Flintstones, like we said, are kind of set in the Stone Age, dealing with modern day, problems. If you look at the Simpsons right off, they don't look like your typical people. First of all, they're yellow. Again, it's animated cartoon, so people don't really care, but they like it because it's unique. It's different, and as different as the Simpsons are, they have a lot in common with the Flintstones in that it's an animated TV show that deals with kind of everyday problems that people can relate to, and that's why I think it was one of those shows that was as popular as the Flintstones. And I think the main reason the Simpsons have kind of knocked the Flintstones off was only because at this point in time, the Simpsons have, probably really are the longest running animated series on TV since the Flintstones, and I think it's going to take another, like you said, special kind of show to kind of dethrone them. And the other interesting thing is the Flintstones I was reading, it was listed as TV Guide's like number 2 most popular cartoon of all time, as you were saying. Only number 2, only to the Simpsons. And then I was looking on the same list. I kind of just wanted to see if this had been updated. The TV Guide list of like most popular animated cartoon shows, and it's funny because from the time they originally did this in 1989, the Flintstones have fallen to like number 8, but they're still up there. They're still in the top 10. So again, to me, that says something right there.
Yeah, but both TV shows have something else that was an influence. I would venture to say that the big influence for The Simpsons was Married with Children.
Oh, yeah.
How it was, at that time when Married with Children came out, it was groundbreaking in the fact that it took a family life TV show and just, started showing, in a comedic way, the ugly side of family life. All of the parts that, are, people are not all that proud of.
Warts and all, as you say.
They used it for their fuel for their comedy, which is very similar to the writing on The Simpsons. It was basically taking a family life and a comedic cartoon and doing pretty much the same kind of thing, showing the uglier side and having that as the comedic fuel. And then the Flintstones was kind of the same thing, where the Flintstones was heavily influenced by the Honeymooners.
Wow.
Which was an extremely popular
TV show, yeah.
Yeah, TV show, written and or created by Jackie Gleason, and both cartoons had their major influences that spawned the flavor for their comedy.
Yeah, and I don't know that the Flintstones would have worked as well if it was a Stone Age family dealing with Stone Age problems, you know what I mean? I think it's the fact that they made it a show that everybody could relate to, an everyday man. And it's funny that you draw the comparisons to Married with Children, because if you think about it, and I've heard people say this before, and it's true, the character of Al Bundy on Married with Children is very Fred Flintstone-like in his thinking and his ways. And it's funny, I was typing stuff up, searching for stuff on the Flintstones today, prepping for this, and I just typed in, Flintstones and pop culture, and they've got this site Fandom, which is pretty interesting. It talks about movies and music and TV shows and stuff, and kind of their place in pop culture. And I guess this site also kind of mentions where, for example, in talking about Married with Children, there was a reference, I guess, in an episode to Fred Flintstone where Al Bundy, who we're talking about, the main character from Married with Children, he's talking to his neighbor Steve, who's kind of, they're kind of like Fred and Barney, but they're always feuding and kind of trying to one up one another. And Steve, who thinks he's superior to Al Bundy, he gives him some kind of insult, and Al gives him a snappy comeback, and he tells him, well, Barney Rubble may have been stupid, but at least he was loyal. And that kind of says it all right there, because that's the thing is that we're going to get into when we start talking about some of the characters. But Fred is this guy that is, he's a little bit smarter than Barney, his buddy that lives next door, and he's always trying to play tricks on him. But at the heart of it, they're the best of friends, and they have their little arguments, but at the end of the day, they're loyal to one another. And it's funny that all these years later, the Flintstones, they would reference in like an episode of Married with Children. You know what I mean? So that tells you right there just how prevalent all these years later that the Flintstones really are.
Yeah, the Married with Children didn't come out until like
the 80s.
I would say the late 80s.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a show that debuted, a cartoon that debuted back in the 1960s, reaching that far. Almost 4 decades into the future. Being influences on comedy that's 4 decades later. Yeah. So it was honestly, as a kid, because Cartoons have become more formulated and much more of a marketing vehicle to sell toys and all of that stuff. During the time when I was a kid, cartoons were much less of a toy selling marketing type of a vehicle and much more of a entertainment vehicle.
Oh yeah,
back in those days. So it was kind of I got to enjoy a different type of childhood with cartoons.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean, and like you said, entertainment I think was a key word there, because a lot of these classic cartoons we're talking about from back in the day when we were growing up. They also did not have a social agenda. Where there are many modern cartoons where they have a social agenda. They're trying to get a message across. Whereas these cartoons like the Flintstones, it was pure entertainment value. They weren't trying to get political. They weren't trying to change anybody's views. It wasn't about that, And I miss these classic cartoons and stuff that were just for pure entertainment and to enjoy,
Well, but the shows back in those days, it was at the very beginning with where they were discovering that they could sell toys that are connected to the shows.
Yeah.
But it was more of a time where they were discovering it. It wasn't a full blown marketing thing that it's become nowadays. When TV shows are in the developmental stages, one of the prime considerations in developing the concept of a cartoon nowadays is the marketing before it ever hits anyone's TVs or anything ever gets released. So there's so much more heavily of a influence of the marketing
and merchandise,
on cartoons and things. So when they come out with movies, my grandkids, all of this stuff
they want,
that they're kind of being exposed to as children. Immediately, there are toys for that cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
There's all of that stuff that hits the stores, and it's a whole thing. But it's kind of unique because when I was a kid, it was a very different time. It was when, like I was saying earlier, it was when they were actually discovering, oh my gosh, we can sell these dolls.
Oh
my gosh, we can make even more money by selling, and but it was at the very beginning of that.
Yeah,
and believe you me, when I was a kid, I was just like any other kid. If I watched that and everything, and I saw the commercial where you could get that toy, boy, did I want that toy. It was like a inner desire, like a magnet. I had to have the toy.
Yeah, this just popped in my head as we're talking about this, but I dare say that talking about the Flintstones, okay, like I said, it premiered in 1960, so the Flintstones even predate, Beatlemania, Kissmania, where Kiss was mass merchandise and they had all kinds of good little toys and stuff. And as we were talking about in our Jaws episode that we're going to air next month, Jaws was really the first kind of movie from the 1970s where they really mass merchandise. And what you're talking about, all these classic TV shows and stuff from back in the day, you're right. But I think like with the Flintstones and stuff like that, it was much more of an organic process, the merchandising. I don't necessarily think that anybody necessarily planned it out as much as these things are planned out these days, like you're saying, Gar. I think it just kind of happened over time, and people started to realize, oh, wait a minute, we can merchandise this stuff. And so much to the point, I remember, not necessarily having a Flintstones doll or anything, but I remember seeing stuff like, like you're saying, Fred Flintstone dolls and T-shirts and stuff, and boys would get stuff like that too, because I'm a Fred Flintstone fan and this and that, but you call it like an action figure because boys didn't play with dolls, stuff like that. And it's funny, all this stuff years later even has effect in fashion if you think about it. I mean, I can tell you as I sit here right now, growing up and watching stuff like the Flintstones and Looney Tunes and stuff, kind of my fashion sometimes reflects what I wear. I mean, for example, I've got a Flintstones t-shirt. I've got a t-shirt with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. And so it's funny that just what entertains you and stuff you watch on the big screen or on TV sometimes affects your fashion.
Well, I mean, nowadays, I mean, it's funny because I would love to have a Fred Flintstone T-shirt or that even nowadays, and here I am, this at this stage of my life. So, I mean, I don't think that any of that has really ended.
Yeah. and I'll tell you, if you want to find that stuff, I mean, go to Amazon.com and just type in like Flintstone T-shirts or Fred Flintstone. You'd be as specific as you can. You'd be amazed all the stuff that comes up. But again, beyond the merchandising, this stuff has turned into people collecting it and having like a Flintstone shrine, for example. If somebody's that diehard of a Flintstones fan, in their house, and they have a room dedicated to all this stuff, T-shirts, posters, DVD collections, anything. And that's a cool thing that all these classic TV shows, you can go on Amazon and you go to different places and you can get like, they have the whole collection of the Flintstones for, it's not a huge, horrible amount. And it's kind of fun because, if you're that big of a Flintstones fan and you get the DVD collection, it's fun to sit back maybe on the weekend and say, I got nothing better to do. I'll sit here and watch this. And to me, it never gets old. It never gets boring. I've seen this stuff. I've seen every episode probably hundreds and hundreds of times, but for some reason, I don't know, it takes me back to my childhood, but I never tire of watching it.
Yeah, it used to be you'd be able to go to a store and there would be stores that would be all memorabilia of things in the past, like the Lucy show and things like that. And of course they would have a section inside the store that would be dedicated to the Flintstones too. And it's kind of sad because I used to love to go into those stores and look around and see if there's something that I would get an impulse buy. On memorabilia type of stuff. But I would imagine nowadays, if you want that kind of stuff, you would have to find a place online. And to me, it's a little bit different. I kind of miss being able to go to a store, getting out of the house, going somewhere, and not just going to that store, but going to that store and other places, and then going out and maybe getting some lunch and
you make a day of it,
just a day out of the house. But nowadays, it just seems that those places have kind of dried up, and the only way to find that kind of stuff nowadays is to just go online.
It's much more of a specialty thing, and so much even beyond buying stuff, people are into if they have a valuable enough collection. Okay, let's sell some of the stuff. I guess depending on what it was, if I thought it would bring me a lot of money, maybe I would sell it. But I'm much more the type of a collector. If I was going to collect anything, that collected just because I enjoy it or because it's so unique. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. A lot of people do everything online, but sometimes we don't have a choice. And being that we're both guys into music, the Flintstones too. I mean, how much did you love that theme to the show? I mean, it would open up with that great Flintstones theme that we all know and love. But I mean, every time it comes on, I just start singing along with it. I don't know about you, Gar.
Oh, yes, of course. And of course with, Yabba Dabba Doo!
Yeah, and see, that, you and I, when we discussed doing this first, that's the first thing you said, Yabba Dabba Doo, my friend. And again, when you think of the Flintstones, I don't know about most people, but I know that's the first thing that comes to mind, Yabba Dabba Doo. And what makes that, I think, is really maybe one of the very first classic catchphrases on TV. And I don't know if they were trying to come up with one, but the great thing about Yabba Dabba Doo, there's no doubt about what we're talking about. We're talking about Fred Flintstone. And the thing I also love about Yabba Dabba Doo, we don't really know what it means, but when he's happy or he gets excited about something or he's overjoyed or, okay, this must be something good because he's Yabba Dabba Doo time,
Yeah. Well, there was this, it's so weird how they fused, modern times in the 60s.
Yeah.
And then combining it with all of these elements. Say when they went to a restaurant, it would be even funny as to what they order because it would be something that would be tied into the dinosaur days.
Oh yeah.
Or the one time they go to a place where they serve you in your car because back in the 60s that was when that was kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
You drive your car and then they would bring the food to your car,
driving,
kind of like a hamburger joint, where where the girl that would bring it out to your car would be on roller skates. But then it would be these gigantic ribs from a dinosaur. That would tip over the car. Or a brontosaurus burger, or just all of these, the elements of. Where it's modern time stuff, but they would, have, prehistoric, elements that, the pets were like saber-toothed cats. Just all of these kind of things that it just became this whole, mix, take them all and throw it in a bowl and mix it up.
And you didn't question it ever. And the thing you're talking about, of a waitress coming down the roller, I know exactly what you're talking about. That scene, in the opening thing where the theme kicks off. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And if you want to go now a little deep into some of the characters, I wrote this stuff down just kind of give us kind of a guide. Fred Flintstone is the main character, the husband and father of a Flintstone family. He is accident prone. Fred is always walking into stuff, things always, he's always tripping and stuff. And I can kind of relate to that because, I give you a good example. I was mopping the other day, mopping around my house, and I was mopping where I have a food dish for the dogs. Wasn't paying attention, knocked the dog food all over and then made a bigger mess. But, so stuff like that people can kind of relate to, you know what I mean? The fact that he's so accident prone.
Well, that's called slapstick.
Yeah.
Slapstick comedy, and slapstick comedy has stood the test of time. It still isn't old even to these days. And slapstick goes many, many years before I was ever born, and was popular amongst for comedians and entertainers, many, many years before my time.
Oh yeah.
So slapstick is a style of comedy that has really stood the test of time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I love so much about slapstick is it's something that is kind of obvious to everybody in the sense that back in those days when they were making shows like that, you didn't need a laugh track. Everybody kind of, it's funny, so everybody's laughing anyways, And I think a good example, you brought up Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners. That show, you watch any episodes, pretty much all slapstick, and you didn't need a laugh track to tell you to laugh. People they got it.
Well, there's that, and it's. I also think that the Honeymooners was a big part of the influence for the show.
Oh yeah.
But there are also a lot of elements that it's another throw elements that you throw in a bowl and mix it all up. The elements of the really popular TV shows of that time.
Oh, yeah.
That comedy TV shows, Bewitched, and there was a lot of flavors from all of those really popular comedies that became part of the flavor for the Flintstones too. Yeah. That whole style of comedy, this sketch comedy.
In fact, I didn't even think about this till you brought up the Honeymooners earlier and Jackie Gleason, but I remember reading somewhere that Fred Flintstone the character was very much based on Jackie Gleason, the way he looked anyways. And getting back to Fred Flintstone, so it says, he is overweight. He likes to eat large amounts of food, which usually combines healthy but mostly large amounts of unhealthy food. He is quick to anger, and it's usually over trivial matters. How many times, Gar, in life, you have somebody who's kind of, has a short temper, and you tell them, hey, you get upset over something really silly. It's not worth, having a heart attack over. But again, this is a common, man. We've all met people like this Fred Flintstone character that just jumps the gun and just goes off at nothing really all that serious. So again, people can kind of relate to him,
Well, if I haven't been guilty of those kind of things,
we all have, yeah.
I definitely know other guys that have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to look at yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it basically touches on what you're saying is that you can relate either by knowing someone or by experiencing it yourself.
Yeah, and I think you just made a great point there, because I went to the we all know people like that, but you make a better point that besides just looking at other people, you got to really take a good long hard look at yourself in the mirror, because I dare say all of us have gotten upset over something really trivial, at least a couple times in our lives, if we're really honest.
Yeah, but the problem with me is I don't realize how trivial it is
at the time.
A long time later.
Yeah.
But that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, you just wish you would, make those kind of realizations much quicker.
Yeah, and I can really say that about myself without getting too specific. I mean, I, for example, have had this happen, a couple times. I enjoy my job I go to for the most part, but like anybody, there's been days where you go and not having such a good day, and you're just fuming all day, and I'm really, thinking about whatever's on my mind or going on at the time all day, and then I get home and realize, it wasn't all that serious, just calm down, relax, and you realize,
But you look back and you go, oh my God, and you put your forehead in your hand and go, oh.
Yeah, wasn't that serious.
I wish I could is there a possibility I can do a do-over?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times I do have to do a do-over. I tell myself, just calm down, relax, you go back the next day. Today's a brand new day. It's not that bad anymore.
Yeah. It's funny because, I really didn't know it, but a really popular, an iconic, popular person that used to do voices in cartoons was Mel Blanc, and he was the guy that did Barney Rubble's voice.
Yeah, and he also
that guy. I mean, as far as cartoons and cartoon voices, that guy is an icon.
Oh yeah, he did a lot of the Looney Tunes. I think one of the main ones he did was Bugs Bunny, of course. What's up, Doc?
Yes, I mean the guy. Probably people nowadays, unless you're, in my age group, you really don't know who Mel Blanc is.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, it was, in the credits, it was his name that
all over the place. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, him and this other guy, Chuck Jones, and just to give people a perspective on this, Bugs Bunny, the Looney Tunes cartoons. That actually predates the Flintstones, and I know this because just last year I think Looney Tunes turned 80 years old, or Bugs Bunny specifically, and so the fact that these guys, he played Barney Rubble, I mean, he did all these other great cartoons years before, so that's a guy that, I mean, he had a long and lasting career.
Yes, very, very long career.
And sometimes,
and then another guy that did one of the voices was a guy named Harvey Korman.
Oh, okay.
And Harvey Korman became really popular in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, Carol Burnett, Mama's Family.
Carol Burnett. If you see Young Frankenstein, he's that German general.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That, his arms are, like mechanic. I don't know how to explain it, but he was hilarious in Young Frankenstein.
Wow.
But, that's, many years before he became famous doing, comedy. And he was just like a regular mainstay on the Carol Burnett show. Yeah. Just him and Tim Conway were really, really popular on that show.
Yeah. Very,
very funny. But Harvey Korman did a character on the Flintstones called the Great Gazoo.
Oh, yes. It was almost like Fred and Barney's conscience. He's like a little spaceman, and and he always ends up getting... And his punishment is taking care of these guys because I don't know what he really did, but he did something bad, and his punishment is you got to take care of these two guys. You're kind of their conscience, and he'd give them like the worst advice, and they'd follow his advice. And Fred, because very much like on the show Bewitched, where Darren never wanted to use witchcraft to gain stuff, and most people would kind of say, yeah, I'd use that witchcraft. My wife, I had a pretty looking witch, but the thing with this Gazoo character was, he was supposed to be like their conscious and give them great advice, but he gave them the worst advice. And Fred was the type of character that, hey, let's see if he can do it for us. And they'd always get in trouble, But that's a very interesting character.
Yes, but it's these are people that. I don't think that a lot of people really knew that they were part of the show.
Oh yeah.
And that went on to have
great success.
A lot of success in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, and if I could follow that up, he was also on a few episodes of Mama's Family, which was kind of a sitcom that was spun off of the Carol Burnett show. He played the goofy son-in-law. But yeah, he was one of those guys. He just died a few years ago, but. Getting back to kind of getting really deep into some of these characters, Wilma Flintstone, of course, is Fred's loving and loyal wife, the mother to their daughter Pebbles. And Wilma is usually, she's much more level-headed and intelligent than Fred. And Wilma likes to go shopping. She likes to spend money, and she is often the foil. This is the key. She's often the foil to Fred's very bad behavior. We've all heard the saying that. Behind every man is a good woman, and this is a perfect example of that, because Fred is its typical caveman, typical man in general. He gets in trouble. He wants to go out and let's go bowling and have fun with his friends and stuff, and he's always getting in some kind of trouble, and he knows right from wrong, and he's a pretty loyal guy, but like being married to someone like Wilma, she's kind of his conscience, if you will, kind of, oh, Fred, that's not a good idea. You're not really, I don't approve of what you're doing. And oftentimes she's a kind of his guide, if you will,
Yeah, well, men are, through the
ages.
test of time, most men, not all men, but most men are basically little boys in a man's body.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a big part of Fred Flintstone's character.
Mm-hmm.
It's that little boy in him that winds up getting him in trouble all the time, and then he needs Wilma,
to pull him back. Yeah.
Kind of keep him on the straight.
Keep him in line.
Narrow,
yeah, and talking all about this is fun today, Gar. And one thing, it's interesting to look back on the Flintstones, because as a kid and just as an adult, every time I watch it, there's things in there that we have seen so many times in the Flintstones that sometimes it's so commonplace you're not even thinking about. But as you bring up stuff like in episodes when they go out to a restaurant, okay, I never really thought about this until today as we're talking, but you'd have like Fred, but he's like a typical man. He doesn't really like to get too dressed up, likes to wear, kind of his caveman attire, but he's never like really got long pants on, never wears shoes. They're going out and you see episodes where he's like supposed to be in a tuxedo, doesn't have any pants on, doesn't have, goes to the restaurant barefoot, but you don't really think
it's a caveman tuxedo.
Yeah, you don't really think about it, you know what I mean? And then you stop and kind of think, yeah, that's true.
That show, that show was really, really popular at that time.
Yeah.
But Hanna-Barbera, those two guys, they were the actual kings of cartoons at that time.
And Saturday morning too, like
they were
Scooby-Doo, Yogi Bear,
out the cartoons more than anyone else. There was a lot of really, really popular cartoons that they put out. I remember, Huckleberry Hound was a really popular show that my sister and I would watch. Yogi Bear,
that was my favorite.
Really popular. For my sister, it's Quick Draw McGraw.
Wally Gator.
There was Wally Gator, Touche Turtle,
Topcat.
And of course another one that became an icon, the Jetsons.
Oh yeah.
It's just there was so much stuff, but when they came out with the Flintstones, and a lot of people were kind of talking to Jackie Gleason, he actually was considering suing them.
Wow.
For copyright infringement to the Honeymooners. Wow. And the main reason why he didn't pursue it is because I guess his people were basically making him aware. Do you want to be known as the guy
that killed Fred Flintstone
that took this show and made all those kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you want to be known as that guy?
Yeah.
And so I guess he backed off, but he was seriously thinking about suing them for copyright infringement.
Yeah. And then getting back to some of the characters, then of course you have Pebbles Flintstone. That's the daughter to Fred and Wilma. Now she was born like at the end of the 3rd season, and you can normally see her wearing a bone of all things in her hair, and this was to hold up her ponytail. And again, that's just because we're in the Stone Age, and again, you don't really notice it. You just think, oh, that's a hair ribbon, but I was reading, no, it's a bone. And like Fred and Wilma, we never see Pebbles wear shoes. They are always barefoot. Dino, you mentioned he's a lovable dinosaur-like pet, supposed to be a dog, and he gets overly excited every time Fred comes home from work. Where he runs towards Fred, always overly excited, knocks him down, and starts, licking him on the face repeatedly. I mean, I don't know about you, but myself, I'm a dog lover. I've had dogs all my life, so that's something that I could kind of relate to, And again, they over-dramatize it, but it's relatable. People love pets, and people can... So, of course, Fred Flintstone's going to have a dog, or a pet or something like that. Makes sense. Yeah. And... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Barney Rubble, he's the second main character, head of a Rubble family. He is Fred's neighbor and best friend. And they were saying that when they made Barney Rubble, they made a point to make him 6 inches shorter than Fred. I guess because Fred's supposed to be the main character. And a lot of times he's kind of making Barney look like a fool, outsmarting him, kind of taking advantage of the fact that he's, compared to Barney and Fred, I guess Fred is the brains of the two. And that's really saying something, but he's overweight too, like Fred. And often they feud one another over mostly Fred's kind of short temper, but at the end of the day, they're best of friends and they're loyal to one another,
Well, it's You know, it was, I all I can say is I loved that show when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I remember I was glued to the TV whenever it came on.
Yeah.
And it was like I said before, it's an unusual time.
Yeah.
Where it was being shown during prime time, and you know, because it had elements that entertained the parents, I didn't have to worry about that conflict of them wanting to watch something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Because with all the other cartoons that I was watching at that time, you know, there were a number of times that I wanted to watch cartoons, and my parents go, nope.
You can watch that,
you know, we're going to watch what I want to watch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Of course, it was boring, you know, parent-type stuff.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, and if, as a kid, you're going, oh, man, you know, stick a knife in me.
Yeah. And now,
but I didn't have that element with that show, is because, you know, that I was able to watch it and not have that conflict, you know, like I used to have with Felix the Cat, or you know, these other cartoons that were also going on at that time. You know, the 60s was a really interesting time.
Yeah.
You know, for cartoons, I just remember, you know, other cartoons that, you know, that my sister and I used to love. There was, you know, Mr. Peabody.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah,
you know, where they go through different time periods. And I remember Fractured Fairy Tales.
Wow.
That one was really cool because they would take fairy tales and just totally mess them up, you know, and make them comedic. And, you know, there's just a whole list, I mean, of all these really popular, you know, shows that were going on. Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Underdog.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Johnny Quest wasn't really, you know, I mean, liked Johnny Quest, but I preferred more of the, you know, comedic kind of stuff. The Huckleberry Hound.
What's really fun is I relate to a lot of what you're saying, because I love a lot of these classic cartoons. We're talking about Flintstones, Yogi Bear, all the Hanna-Bear stuff, you know, Scooby-Doo. The list goes on and on. But if you really go look back the history of animation, I mean, you go back years before all this. I mean, even to like the 1930s when they first started having like Popeye the Sailor cartoons. And you can get, again, some of these great DVD collections of that stuff. And it's fun to watch for a lot of reasons. But you can just see how different the cartoon films were made back then. They look different. The sound is different. You know, and a lot of that technology was just kind of starting at that point. And a lot of the early, for example, Popeye commercials from the 30s, that's before, you know, they ever had color film. So a lot of those, if you go back and you watch those, it's interesting because they're in black and white. But, you know, and so you can, when you're watching those, okay, those are like from the 30s and 40s because they didn't have color then, you know. So that's what makes it fun too. Because you can kind of, just watching it, kind of tell from the techniques and the special effects or whatever they were lacking, the time period that you're watching, you know.
You know, there's just, you know, I didn't mind black and white cartoons.
Yeah,
but
if it was good.
I was one of those transitional kids where there was a lot of cartoons that I was watching because back in, you know, there was a time period in the early 60s where all TVs in every person's house was a black and white TV.
And you were rich.
So everything you watched on TV was in black and white. And then, you know, getting towards the late 60s, then they started introducing color TVs into the households. Yeah. And then you were able to start seeing some stuff that was, you know, colorized.
Yeah.
But during that time, some of the stuff that you would watch would be in black and white, even though the TV's color.
Yeah.
You would be watching it in black and white, and then some of the stuff you would be watching in color. You know, and it was just kind of a, you know, these unique things to the time period.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, you and me, we've always kind of had color TVs probably, but I've had black and white TVs too. But the point being is, back in the day, like especially when they started coming out with color TV, a lot of people did not have color TVs, and a lot of people thought, if you have color TV, you must be rich. That's what a new thing it was back then.
That's the truth. Yeah. They were much, much more expensive, and most people couldn't justify spending that extra money to have that TV, especially when they already have a black and white. We'll deal with this. Stay with the black and white for now.
Yeah, and you're so right that I even remember to the point where like my grandmother was telling me, back in the day, people did not go out and readily, spend $400 or $500 on a TV and have a TV in every room of their house. Back in the day, there's typically one TV in the house, and everybody, like you're saying, would get down. After dinner, you'd get in the living room, and everybody would watch the same thing. Most people just simply did not have a choice. You only had one TV, so better agree on what you're going to watch and enjoy it. And it's funny because we've also talked about this, our colorization of film, but I think one of the best TV shows that kind of did that transition well is when they started doing Bewitched. A lot of early episodes were in black and white, and since they've transferred all those episodes like into color. And I think with Bewitched it worked beautifully because people prefer color. It doesn't seem to really affect it for some reason. I don't know why this is, but I think I shared this story with you before. My friend, he got a DVD where they colorized like all the episodes of Lucille Ball, and it's fun to watch because you're not used to seeing that, and it kind of looks, but I don't know why it looks so different, but it looks kind of hokey when I watch it. I guess maybe just because all these years I'm so used to seeing that in black and white. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, some things are better left alone.
Yeah.
But back in those days, my you know what was my parents' remote control?
Yeah.
I was my parents' remote control.
Yeah.
When they wanted to watch something different, I was the one that got up and changed it to whatever channel that they wanted.
Wow. How did that kind of fall on you?
And back in those days, there was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel
ABC,
5, Channel 7, Channel 9,
and 11,
Channel
13,
11, and Channel 13. So what's that? 7
networks,
channels. Yeah. That's all there was to choose from back in those days.
Yeah, and see...
7 channels.
Like the Flintstones and all these classic shows, they got a new life in the fact that you do have cable TV. I mean, if you go on something even as simple as YouTube, you can find old episodes of the Flintstones. I seen where on HBO Max, if you get that, you can sit there and watch the episodes of the Flintstones all day. They got Cartoon Network. You got all these classic shows that if you're a fan, mixed with some modern day cartoons. And then just a few more things to wrap this up, because I think we covered a lot of this. Betty Rubble, of course, was the wife to Barney, mother to Bam Bam, best friend to Wilma. Very much like Wilma, Betty also enjoys spending money, shopping, and also is very jealous. Both Wilma and Betty, if they ever, like most women, I guess most like people in general, if they ever caught their mate like even looking at the opposite sex or thought somebody else was checking them out, they really didn't like it too much. And there's a few episodes where they kind of are like that, and it's kind of funny, but like very much like the male characters of the show, Betty and Wilma are the best of friends. Wilma's kind of the head of that little group there, and Betty kind of like Barney does with Fred, kind of just goes along with whatever Wilma says, but that's why they get along so well, because they have so many common interests.
Well, a little weird twist to what you're talking about is over the years it was really popular to have the debate who's hotter on Gilligan's Island.
Oh yeah.
Marianne or what's the other chick?
Marianne.
Or the other girl?
Marianne.
But the same debate goes on between Wilma and Betty.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because they're cartoon characters. They're not even real.
Yeah, but
but there's that same debate that goes on between Wilma and Betty.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I didn't think about that, but you're right. You're right, because I've heard people have those kind of conversations, and it's kind of funny because again, same thing, very much like the two girls on Gilligan's Island, as you said. And on one hand, okay, you got Marianne, who's supposed to be this little wholesome farm girl, but then she wears these really short shorts, and the big controversy back in the day, she not so much even the short shorts, but she wore those tops where her midriff was always shown, and I guess they got a lot of letters complaining about that at first, but that became one of the things the show was known for. And then you had Ginger, supposed to be a real hottie.
There you go, Ginger, that's right.
The movie star, but what's funny is the one that's supposed to be wholesome, she had less on than the so-called movie star. You think Ginger would equally maybe like to show skin, but she was more covered up, and she's supposed to be one that's hotter, but the one that's everybody thinks is maybe more wholesome really isn't. I mean, and that's maybe what the appeal was.
Yeah. But I just always thought that was funny.
Yeah.
How do you take a cartoon character and do that same type of debate? But it's just one of those little quirks to the Flintstones.
Yeah. I think it's because the Flintstones have been on. Yeah. The Flintstones have been around so long, and I think also the fact that so many people can relate to these characters. I mean, maybe as silly as it sounds, some people forget their cartoon characters, but you look at another cartoon. You ever seen the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Look how they sexed up Jessica Rabbit. I mean, yeah. Yes. Yeah, so I mean, they can go there, and it's amazing where the mind can go. And I guess this is the best place to kind of wrap this up, unless you have anything else to add. Bam Bam, of course, was the adopted son of Barney and Betty, named after, and this is interesting if you think about it, named after the only thing he ever says throughout the show's history. When you see Bam Bam, first of all, he's supposed to be the world's strongest kid, and again, we just kind of go with what we're told. Don't question it. There's never really an explanation how he got super strength. You just go with it, and that's the only thing he ever says. Every time you see him, bam, 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 bam. That's all he ever says. Now, years later, they had they had an updated version of a Flintstones where Pebbles and Bam Bam are all grown up. They kind of make Pebbles like kind of a cute little redheaded sex pot, and Bam Bam is very much like Barney. I guess they portray him as kind of dumb, but friendly, nice guy, but in this he says more than just Bam Bam. He's all grown up, so he's learned to talk now. So he says other things. So. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's kind of, I didn't mind so much because we got to see, and Fred and Barney and Wilma, they all look the same, but the kids are grown up, and so you have that, and it's kind of gives you a different aspect of it, which you don't get with a lot of shows. So it was interesting, I think, for that reason alone.
Well, I could swear, that my grandson is a direct descendant to Bam Bam.
Really? Wow. Now, you talking about just his super strength or his...
Just, Bam Bam, is always hitting things. Bam,
okay.
Hitting things. And that my grandson, boy, he's at that stage where he's doing the Bam Bam thing all the time.
Yeah, and I think before we wrap this up, there are two other really important things we got to bring up about the Flintstones. And you and I were talking about this before. On some of these classic TV shows, like something as simple as you watch the Brady Bunch, and we talked about the fact that they could never show a toilet in the bathroom scene. I don't know why, but people were freaking out about that. Or Mom and Dad, you could see them kiss and hug in the bed, but Mom and Dad never had a scene where they're really going crazy and making out like you would in a lot of modern day shows now. Or Dad was never without his top. Dad was fully dressed, and so was Mom. And they were always like on top of the bed. They were never under the covers because they couldn't have that back in the day. But I was reading the Flintstones because it was an animated cartoon. They were actually the first TV husband and wife, Fred and Wilma, that was allowed to be seen sleeping in the same bed together. And that's kind of a funny thing to think about because it's a cartoon, and okay. Husbands and wives, they sleep together, but we didn't think about all this stuff back then like you do now,
Well, it's just, another reflection of the times, because, back in those days, it was just so much more of a taboo subject, nowadays it's like a non-issue.
Yeah, and then also bringing up the issue of Bam Bam. Okay, Fred and Wilma, they had Pebbles, and Pebbles was born in a natural way. I guess Barney and Betty couldn't have any kids, so they adopt Bam Bam. That was a story, and it's the first time they had any kind of story like that. I was reading on TV. I mean, probably before, like in Popeye the Sailor we were mentioning earlier. Alden and Popeye, they adopt Sweet Pea, but we don't really know Sweet Pea boy or Sweet Pea girl. There's indications that they adopted, but they don't really go into detail about it. So with Bam Bam coming on the Flintstones, that was the first time a major TV show like that even had anything about adoption, which is kind of interesting if you think about it.
Yeah, yes, they're just taking modern
problems,
subject matter and infusing it into Stone Age background. Great show. And
before we wrap it up, I was just gonna say, as always, Gar, I love doing this stuff with you, and part of the reason is, every time we do an episode, just talking to you, stuff comes up in the conversation, such as today. I'm thinking, I think eventually we're going to have to do an episode on the Honeymooners. That's a great classic TV show, and I think also it's a show that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about, and for that reason alone, we need to kind of bring it up every chance we get. But that was a real classic show from back in the day, just one of the most funniest things. And I think, doing the Flintstones kind of brings that up, and how there's so much similarity between the two.
Well, I grew up watching that show with my parents.
Yeah.
It's very familiar territory for me.
Yeah. And so, I know next up, you and I were discussing, you'd want to do the Addams Family for a lot of reasons. I know that was one of your all-time favorite, shows. And I was
from the 60s. Yeah. I loved that show. I loved all of the characters on the show.
Yeah.
It was a great combination of horror / creepy / comedy.
Yeah, and it was really one of the, I dare say the first show of that kind, to kind of mix up horror and comedy. And I was curious, and to just kind of preview people what's coming next. When we do the episode, do you think you want to do just focus on the TV show? Do you want to focus on like the whole history, like the movies and that? Or do you think that would be better to save for another time?
Well, I just watched the first remake of the Addams Family, that movie.
Yeah.
I just watched that, and I thought they did a good job.
Yeah.
But it's just, when you grew up on the people that, the actor that did Gomez.
Yeah.
And the rest of the actors, the guy that did Uncle Fester.
Yeah.
It's just, they just set a standard for anybody else to just. It would make it so hard, to be able to, do, those characters, because they were the originators of the character. They put so much life into those characters on that TV show. It's just for actors and actresses, it had to be an absolute blast
to do that,
to portray those characters, because for actors and actresses, it's just an explosion of your own creativity. So when you're establishing rather than redoing, it's just it has to be an absolute so much fun to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, you kind of answered my question, and I think since that's your wheelhouse, we will stick with the TV show, because we'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure. And just as I said, Gar, it's always It's always fun doing this and talking to you. But yeah, so our episode we did on Black Sabbath, Masters of Reality, the 50th anniversary of that, that's going to be going up sometime next week. So people can look for that. And if anybody hasn't already joined our Facebook page, I urge you to go over there and do so. And we have a lot to look forward to. So thanks for doing this, Gar. I'll be getting in touch with you again.
All good. It's my pleasure. I very, very much appreciate.
Okay, take care, my friend. Bye-bye.